Hello out there, Internet. As I was, oh hello, William Shakespeare. Heaven forbid the books have the precedence for a little while. As I was unpacking my books, I decided that it might be useful to share which of my patterning books that I found most useful and why, and I thought I'd share them here with you as a book review. Someone wanted to knock over my camera as well. I figured I would start with my first ever costume book. This is the first book that I ever bought and started me on my costume making career, as well as, you know, my hobby and my life, more or less. It is Patterns of Fashion by Janet Arnold, and it's the 1560 through 1620 version. As you can see, it's well loved and fairly well worn, and this is the actual original book. Now, my Patterns of Fashion books tend to look rather new, despite being used quite a bit, partially because I get excited about patterning books, and I foist them upon unsuspecting victims when I get excited about a project. And so I replace them fairly often, but this is the one exception. I never lend this one out, just because it was my first, and it is definitely one of my favorites. If you have not gotten your own version of it yet, you're still probably familiar with the general structure of it. The first part of it is extremely well researched and jam-packed, filled with pattern research and portraits and extant or photos of extant pieces that you can look at the interior details and how they were sewn and with what and what closures, and it is quite the wealth of information. But also at the back, it has wonderfully drawn out and carefully written patterns that are on a 2-scale grid that if you are a fan of, well, even if you're a fan of drafting your own, it's still good pattern research to see what the shapes are supposed to look like. But also if you have something that is fairly unfitted, you can always do radial drafting or even to scale drafting. But in general, the patterns in it are really quite wonderful, certainly for research and so forth as well. If you don't have your own copy, I highly recommend it. And it is powerful enough that it inspired so many people, as well as myself included. And I just want to thank ElizabethanCostume.net back in the day for more or less teaching me that this was something that people do, and led me to this book in the first place, as well as being able to do it as a career. Now the next one is another Pattern of Fashion. Yay! This one is significantly slimmer. This is Patterns of Fashion 1, and it is 1660 through 1860. Also a wonderful book that's set up in the same sort of way, with pattern research and so forth in the front, and the beautiful detailed patterns in the back that are to scale with the wonderful detailed drawings. It's also a one black and white, and it's a beautiful research resource to be able to look at very detailed perspectives on extant pieces, rather than secondary research. Patterns of Fashion 2. Oh, hey, there's a theme. Patterns of Fashion 2, also a little bit thicker than Patterns of Fashion 1, but not quite as thick as the first one that I showed you, which is technically 3, if I recall correctly. This is 1860 through 1940. And it's set up in the same sort of way. It's got beautiful extant dresses in there, as well as pattern research at the front, and shows more or less how things were cut out, as well as what materials and so forth. It's a really wonderful resource, and certainly worth looking at as well. If you do not already have your own copy of Patterns of Fashion 4, I highly recommend it as well. This is a really wonderful book. This one is in glorious, glorious color, set up in the same sort of way. This one was finished, hello William, you do like roughs, don't you? Go figure, right? The cat named William Shakespeare is a fan of the rough book. This one was finished after Janet Arnold had died, but she had done a lot of the research in it, and the tribute to her memory is really telling in this. It's beautifully done, and is a really fantastic, it's a good thing he's cute. A fantastic resource for anyone who's interested in black work and gold work and red work, in building your own ruffs and patterns, and the ruff supports, and all of the wonderful details they could possibly ever want in shirts and linens, and all of the layers and so forth, and the details that go into making something look absolutely amazing. And this is from 1540 through 1660, and it is a wonderful, wonderful, beautiful resource. And I really hope that you can get a copy of it. If this particular video reaches a, let's say 100 people watching it, I do have an extra copy of this. This one found its way back into my possession unexpectedly. So I have 2 of them now, and I think one of you should have them. So if we get to a certain number of views, I will pick at random one of the commenters and send this out to one of the people who watches. But wait, there's more. Patterns of Fashion 5. Also a wonderful addition to the Janet Arnold collection. This one is specifically about structured garments. So you have pairs of bodies, hoops, false rumps, and all sorts of wonderful things. This one is still looking fairly new because it is. I haven't really had a whole lot of chance to play with it yet, but it's set up in the same sort of way, also in glorious, beautiful color, extremely thick. This is the thickest of the bunch, and the amount of research and so forth that is in here is really amazing. It's beautiful. I highly recommend it, and the wide variety of shapes that are provided, I think, is really telling as far as the eras that are represented in here from 1595 to 1795. It's really beautiful. I greatly look forward to when they come out with 6, if they ever do. And if you do not have these in your collection yet, hopefully they will come out with more prints of them. I do believe that demand is fairly high currently, and hopefully we'll keep that up with all of the wonderful enthusiasm in history bounding and historical reenactment that's been blossoming over the years lately. Now for something that's a little bit later period than a lot of the other things that I've had before, but in the same sort of line as a lot of the other ones that we were looking at, as far as having really interesting and beautiful pictures of some in color and some in not, but also including some really wonderful flat patterns that you can scale up and scale down in the same sort of radial drafting that you would otherwise do, and with the genius of V&A. I do love building stuff out of this. She was a genius in her own sort of way as far as the cutting goes, and it shows in a lot of the simplicity of the patterns, but the absolute complexity of what it looks like actually on the body, and using bias to such a wonderful degree. It's very educational. If you haven't looked at bias patterns before, start here. This is probably my favorite place to start. It looks just kind of like a coffee table book, and I mean, it serves that purpose. It's got beautiful pictures in it, but the patterns in this particular copy are some of my favorites. So it's very useful on a pattern research side of things, as well as a drafting research. So I would highly recommend it if you haven't looked at that yet. Here's another one coming up that I think a lot of you probably have seen before. It is also one of my newest looking ones, partially because it's fairly new. And I haven't really had a whole lot of a chance to build 18th century stuff yet from it, but it is a really beautiful book. It goes into a lot of the basics as well as the particulars of what it takes to make a really beautiful, historically accurate gown. Well, even an outfit. Like, they have all sorts of accessories in here as well. They go over basic stitches. It doesn't really have a whole lot in the way of patterns, but it does kind of walk you through a lot of the steps that you would take to get to the patterns. The patterns themselves are fairly basic, which, I mean, honestly, that's not a bad place to be. They're pretty much any time that you're going to put a pattern onto a different hue and body is going to change anyway. But as far as the pattern research goes, it's really quite nice. They have quite a variety in there. Lots of beautiful, glorious detail shots. And the copy text is really nice as well, without being too wordy. It's fairly concise, which is nice, and it covers a pretty broad spectrum considering it's a fairly thick book, but it's a lot to cover in a fairly small volume. It is concise, I think. All right, so since William has decided to join us here, he's quite the cutie, but is being rather obnoxious at the moment, as cats are wont to do. So I'm going to talk about next two books that I think are an excellent foundation for the start of when you're first starting to learn to make patterns from scratch yourself. A lot of the other books that I've been showing are good for research and so forth, but these ones will actually teach you the theory and the actual practicality behind it. So let's see if I can foist this dragon from his particular hoard here. All right, come here, pretty boy. Okay, so we're going to move on to The Art of Fashion Draping by Connie Omden Crawford. Oh dear, I'm going to pronounce that horribly wrong. So this is a really wonderful basic draping start. So this will walk you through all of, as you can see, a lot of notes and so forth that I've taken and handed off to students of mine and projects and so forth. Let me drop it all onto the ground now that I have it there. But this goes over a lot of the how to achieve basic silhouettes and the theory behind it, and how to use grain line to your advantage, and how do you actually get to the point of making fitted garments from draping, why different fibers drape in different rates, and how to start working out away from the body as well. And so this will get you started. Like all of the best basics are here. It's all in black and white. It's very straightforward, which is very nice. The step-by-step instructions are minute in detail. So you will get, go from one step to the next step, and you won't get horribly lost, even when working by yourself. I would highly recommend this one as far as, let's see if we can actually keep him off the table, is if you're trying to study draping by yourself and have a willing sibling or other person around and some bed sheets, you can totally follow along step by step in here and end up a much better much better prepared to be able to tackle being given a picture and told, make this. This is an excellent foundation to start with. It is very basic, but we'll get into some harder stuff later on. But if you're going to start off with a book that's just a textbook for draping, this is a great place to start, and I highly recommend it. All right, so what about flat patterning and your dart theory? So, pattern making for fashion design. Doesn't really matter which edition. The editions are more or less to make everything in it a little bit more fashionable, but all of the classwork in it is more or less the same. So you'll be learning the same sort of things. It just may look very 70s or very 80s or very 90s or early 2000s in this particular case. And it's by Helen Joseph Armstrong. I would say that the drafts in here are rather complex. Like, when it really comes down to it, unless you are building for someone sight unseen, it's probably a lot easier and faster to start with a simpler draft and then have a fitting and figure out the small differences as well. But as far as walking you through step-by-step dart theory and how to manipulate all of your patterns to do crazy and wacky things just through flat patterning. So on a table, you have something that you know fits this person, but you want the dart there, or you want the sleeve to do this, or you want the skirt to do that, or you want extra fullness here. This will walk you through it. And it's a great step-by-step class-based idea. So if you have a piece of paper, or actually a lot of paper, a lot of paper, and say half-scale pattern, which you can make yourself from instructions online, or even full size, you could do it to your size as well. You can walk yourself through these day by day, like homework, because I mean that's what it's designed to do. It's supposed to be homework. It does have some more advanced things in it, but for the most part, it's a very good basic starter of, oh, can you do that? Yes, you can. And it is hefty and fairly thick, but it is fairly comprehensive. It has sleeves, it has trousers, it has bodices, it has skirts, it has all sorts of stuff, as long as you're making stuff for women anyway. This is a great place to start for flat patterning and learning dart theory and how to manipulate darts. Highly recommended as a great starting point. Now, if you want to really bend your brain, if those are much too easy for you, if you have run into dart theory and gone, I can do that no matter how crazy this looks, let me introduce you to something that made me sit the first time that I've looked at it and stare at a pattern for 20 minutes just trying to wrap my brain around it. The Pattern Magic books by Tomoko, what is it? Tomoko Nakamichi. Oh dear. Tomoko Nakamichi. They are really fantastical, and really they have half scales in the back. If you're looking for half scales as well, they're fairly reasonably priced. They do have, it's all in centimeters, but honestly the principles will work the same whether you're doing it in centimeters or in English measurements. But it's beautiful color, it's all sorts of really off-the-wall, out there designs. I think that's as good as we're going to get with the cat. It's a good thing he's cute, but Pattern Magic. Nope, you're not doing that. Come here, off the table. So let's keep this PG, shall we? So there are also other books in the Pattern Magic series. They are also wonderfully detailed and crazy and out there as well. If you want something that will bend your mind a little bit of, is that actually possible? This is a great place to start. You might notice that they say now in English on these as well. You can get them in English or in Japanese. They were originally printed in Japanese, as you can probably tell by the name of the author. Highly recommend it. And as well as Pattern Magic 3. There are more out as well that go into knitwear. I don't find them as challenging as far as something that I need right this second to bend my brain around crazy things, but they're really fun. These are a great place to start. I haven't felt the need to buy the knit ones yet, but I may do that at some point. But as far as mind bending, is that really on a person sort of patterns? Pattern Magic. I would highly recommend all three. They're all really out there and wonderfully creative, and absolutely up there as far as great costume patterning books. I highly recommend them. If you're looking for another slightly cheaper version of a flat patterning book, this one is also quite good. The Pattern Making by the Flat Pattern Method. This also has a lot of the same sort of similar graphics and so forth of basic dart theory and how to manipulate things. The patterns themselves are a little bit less detailed, but honestly, it's not really that necessary until you start getting into very clean lines and so forth. But it does walk you through the basics quite well. The computerized section in the back is quite wonderfully dated. That's very fun, as you can kind of tell by the giant monitor in the forefront. The patterning methods and dart theory has not really changed all that much, so I recommend this one as well. I tend to prefer the Armstrong version a little bit more, but they're both very useful if you're trying to pull stuff for potential workbooks, more or less, of projects to work on. I'd highly recommend that.